Greetings, YouTube, and you already know what time it is. We got dude. We got car. We got a dude in the car. The only thing missing are a pair of sunglasses like a long list of forefathers before me, which tells you that a hot take is coming in. Here we go. And on today's topic for Talk Shit Monday, auto stop start is bullshit. The idea behind auto stop start in cars is simple in theory. When you come to a full stop, like I'm about to do, once the car detects that I was stopped for a certain amount of time, it disables and turns off the engine. As soon as I step off the brake, the engine cranks and turns itself back on. In the process, shuddering to a halt, turning off any air conditioning that I might be running, and basically the car suddenly losing all vibration and quietness that my body has just gotten accustomed to, thereby saving some gas. And this is of course a wonderful idea. Saving gas, especially when it's this expensive, maybe not such a bad idea, but I have a problem with it. And the problem is that you cannot disable it permanently. Yes, there is indeed a button that you can press in all cars and it will disable the auto stop start, but only for the time that you're driving. The next time that you cycle the car and you turn it back on, it'll forget that you ever pressed that button and it'll turn it back on. Now here's why I personally don't like the system at all. Because you'll be driving and you come to a stop at a traffic light and suddenly the car gives you this sensation that it's stalled out. I grew up in cars which did not have any such features, and when the car stalled, especially in my manual transmission cars, it means that I'm the one that stalled the engine because I let out the clutch too soon or not soon enough, whatever it is, but it's like a jarring experience. And what I especially don't like is, like, I'm at a light, I'm at a stop sign, and suddenly the car turns off, and without having prior knowledge to this technology even being a thing in cars, it's like, yeah, it feels like the engine stalled, the air conditioning turns off, it really feels like something just went wrong with the car. And especially where I'm in a situation like, let's say I'm in one of those strange places where it's an on-ramp, but it's a stop sign leading into the on-ramp. That is the last fucking thing I want to feel, is the engine stalling. On an on-ramp, every precious second counts, and it feels to me like a grievous error has occurred, and it actually distracts me from performing the maneuver safely. And some might say that just my experience in and of itself is not a good enough reason to allow the disabling of such a system. But to that I say, the way I want to experience my car is entirely up to me, and I should have the choice to disable something that I find really quite annoying, because it does sour me. Because I find it jarring, gives me a bit of anxiety, whatever. Even if it's like, okay, even if I know what the system is doing, I still don't like it. I want to disable it, but I cannot. And that is classical government for you. The government thinks they know better than you, that they know better than the manufacturers, and they heavy-handedly force some technology to be integrated into a car, which, by the way, I didn't ask for. If I had the option when having this car built to just delete auto stop start entirely, I would have done so. And I'm sure it would have made the car a lot cheaper to build in the first place. So right off the bat, and the first reason is this: it is no good when your choice gets eliminated, when your sovereignty gets violated, and they just say, no, we know better than you, and you just have to follow suit because we say so. I have an inherent problem with that. But on the manufacturing side, there's also a bevy of problems, because it is probably quite expensive to integrate all these shenanigans into a car, because now we're talking all kinds of tech that needs to allow this mechanism to function reliably. Because yes, of course, if you're gonna have such a system and it keeps bothering your starter like 100 more times than you normally would, then suddenly now you are forced to engineer something that's more reliable and robust as a result, and therefore the cost increases. So whereas I might have used the starter 20,000 times before needing to replace it, in the same time frame where I have a car equipped with the stop-start shit, now it's being used 200,000 times. And just off the top of my head, now I need a far more robust starter. Now I need a whole system that works to detect the dead center of the cylinders so that it can start and restart under a certain amount of time, because it has to be quick and it has to be relatively quiet. Now I have to add a deep cycle battery. Now I have to add smarts and software to determine under which circumstances do I actually kill the engine, under which circumstances do I determine that my passengers are getting too hot or too cold in the cabin and then I have to abort the cycle. It's a lot of rigmarole. And what a disaster if any portion of the system fails and now I have to repair it. Probably won't be cheap. All for the sake of what? Saving 1 teaspoon of gas? Now this might be a facetious thing to say. Perhaps it's more, perhaps it's less. I'm not really sure. It could wind up saving you 1 mile per gallon, maybe even 2 miles per gallon. But it all really depends on not just weather conditions, but your own driving habits. Which ironically means that if I'm getting annoyed by the system constantly kicking in when I'm at a traffic light, then I might actually be more apt to drive more aggressively, thereby negating any and all fuel savings that could have been had from such a system. And not to mention things that are a lot more difficult to quantify, like, well, what does it mean to have a nuisance in your life that you have to live with? Basically, what this stop-start is, by not having a full elimination method, is now I have to live with it. And by having basically this full-time nuisance in my life, who's to say what happens and how it affects other avenues of my life? If it stresses me out here in the car, it might stress me out at work. It might stress me out at home. Perhaps I will become less productive. Now we're really wasting more and more time and resources, all because somebody decided a choice needed to be eliminated. So if we're keeping tally here, that would perhaps be the third reason why auto stop start is bullshit, or more specifically, one that you cannot disable, and that is an inquantifiable human factor. Because you are now altering my mood, or not giving me the choice to take my power back, it affects all those avenues of my life, which I just mentioned. And the first two being a violation of sovereignty, and the second, of course, being cost. I mean, who honks at kids? Come on. Even if they are being, like, fucking irresponsible. And finally, we reach the peak of absurdity, and that being the fourth reason why auto stop start that you cannot permanently disable is total bullshit. And that is because, to what length will I go to get rid of this feature, and what does it take? Now, in a separate video, perhaps the next video, I will go over how I'm planning on eliminating the auto stop start feature from my Ford Bronco, which is either going to involve reprogramming the ECU or installing an auto stop start eliminator, which is basically a device that lives between the switch for disabling the auto stop start, which only disables it temporarily, and it's an interface between that button and the computer, and it's basically, if I had to guess, some kind of latch, some kind of memory module that when you press the button, it remembers, aha, he pressed the button, I'm going to remember that for next time, and the next time you turn on the car, it automatically sends a signal to the computer saying, hey, he just pressed the switch, so I no longer have to perform that action anymore. Now here's what's absurd about all that. For all the resources that they were expending to save, I don't know, a mile per gallon or whatever, how many resources is it going to take? How much time, money, and resources is it going to take for me to install that dongle? Whatever it took for the engineers to design that dongle, then therefore have that dongle be manufactured, which there is some kind of finite fuel cost or whatever you want to call it. So you're effectively fighting fuel with yet more fuel. For every dollar that's been put up to remove a choice from me and to save some gas or whatever the fuck, now I'm gonna put up an equal amount of dollars, if not more, to negate that, because all I fucking want is the choice back in my hands. And the irony, of course, being that any fuel that might have been saved by this feature is now going to be completely eliminated or even rolled back as a result of what I now have to do to give myself the choice back. So yes, this then becomes just another item in a long laundry list of government fiddle-fucking consumer products throughout the ages, really. Because remember, in the 80s, they had all those emissions restrictions that they started screwing with carburetors and made engines horrendously inefficient, gutless, and people fought a war against the government back then too. There came a point where they even started to, I'm assuming this is by government mandate, plugging the air to fuel ratio knobs inside a carburetor, so you were no longer able to adjust it, so it gets set once at factory and then plug welded so you can't alter it anymore, which is ridiculous considering a carburetor needs to be tuned on occasion. So then you have to drill it out. You have just to get to those knobs. Or the whole diesel exhaust fume fiasco. Or setting what seem to be completely fucking arbitrary standards for fleet fuel economy standards. By 2025, all cars need to be at 60 miles per gallon. By 2030, we want to eliminate gasoline engines altogether, ignoring the fact that the grid is in no state to support such a switchover. And it is not even entirely clear whether an electric car is beneficial for the environment or not. And the government forever being distrustful of consumers making the right choices for themselves ultimately. So to summarize, this is where we're at. Removal of sovereignty is a huge problem. Basically saying that as a consumer, you don't have a choice. Two is the ridiculous cost that is then foisted not just on the manufacturers, but therefore on the consumers. Because who knows how much more expensive it is to now manufacture a car, because they had to bolster the starter and the battery and install this whole system. It's also about the third reason, or second reason, which is, does this create a net drag or benefit on societal well-being? Does it make us happier? Does it make us more productive? Or does it do quite the opposite? And does it stress us out more? Because it is, no matter what you say, it is still quite a jarring experience to have your car stall out in the middle of traffic. And finally, it's about ultimately the war that will ensue between customers, manufacturers, and the regulations that will in all probability negate the very thing that they tried to prevent in the first place, which in this case they're trying to prevent fuel from being burned, but now we're adding fuel to the fire just to solve the fucking problem. And now before I sign off, just as an addendum, I can already almost feel the seething rage of the pearl clutchers, because they'll claim that all of this is good and all of this is necessary in the name of whatever the fucking activism of the day is.
They might say, but it offsets carbon, or it's because climate change, or it's because the government really does know better, or it's because I feel guilty about burning fuel, or I feel guilty about driving a huge truck. I don't give a shit. The most important thing is choice. Because without choice, without sovereignty, one day you wake up in a fucking dystopia, much like we're living through right now, because so much choice has been eliminated. And it's in the shit that you don't even notice that hurts you the most. So in a nutshell, if you want auto stop start and you think it's wonderful, great, that is your prerogative. My prerogative, however, is that I don't want it, and I should therefore have the choice to not have it. Because no two people are living the same lives, and you cannot expect me to have the same values as you just because you want me to. Just because you cannot reconcile the fact that I don't share the same values as you. And anyways, that about sums it up. On the next video, I will show you exactly how to install a device that disables this cursed feature. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.